Hello everyone, this is MC Squared.
And the Otaku Jock.
And it is Monday, July 25th at the time of this recording. We have just come back from a Fathom Events screening of The Killing Joke, which should be on sale on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital by the time this video goes up. Probably, maybe, depending on rendering time.
It should be out by the time this video comes out, that's the bottom line. Or if you didn't go see it, there's a second Fathom screening on Tuesday night if you're still watching this. If you're watching this in the future, sorry you missed out. Probably should still be on Blu-ray though.
But yeah, what a movie.
Quite a movie. This was an experience.
This was something I've been waiting a long time for. The question is, does it hold up?
I think that for a movie that's based on a comic that some critics have cited as one of the more problematic, to use the term, comic stories of modern DC history, I think it definitely does hold up. But at the same time, I think that there is some. I think that part of I think that a lot of the controversy that's coming out from this particular adaptation, honestly, kind of overshadows what else is in the book, and we're gonna get to that.
Not surprisingly, writer Alan Moore once again withholds his name from an adaptation of one of his properties, or not properties, but one of his works. In typical Alan Moore fashion.
I think it's pretty apparent that the guy doesn't want anything to do with DC. Not to say that he's completely at fault for that, but at the same time, you know what, you want to go for that, go watch his original video about authors that dislike their works. That video that was made a long time ago.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah, pretty long ago at this point. But no, this was, and I was excited about this too, and I think that as a whole thing, I still think that this is probably one of the darkest things that DC Animation has put out.
Absolutely. I mean, this was a fucking R rating.
Yes.
The Dark Knight Returns movies didn't get an R rating.
Nope. No, the Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns adaptations, yeah, those didn't get an R rating. This got an R rating.
This was pretty brutal.
Pretty brutal, pretty psychologically testing, and just, you get to points where you're literally just sitting there wondering what the heck is going on screen right now with this. I have to, at the very least, give the people who worked on this credit, because there was a little documentary that showed right after the Fathom presentation that kind of focused on the composing team, but also kind of the sort of like the overall audio mixing of the entire movie. And one of the things that I think that was very good was that they showed pretty much how all of the how they storyboarded, and it almost looked like scene for scene right out of the book.
Comic book, right?
Which, you at the very least you have to give them credit. And again,
not every scene lined up.
No.
Like that scene in the upside down room, that was not in the comic book. The dialogue was from the comic book, but that setting was not in there.
I mean, again, that was always something that was said about this. When we finally learned that The Killing Joke was going to be made by DC and by DC's animated team, they were very, very upfront in saying that we're going to need to add some things. We're going to need to do some slight changes to this to make this work. And part of that is, and unfortunately we are going to have to talk about this at some point, it's probably better that we get this out of the way right now. The early 20 minutes of
the opening act of the film.
Yes, the opening act. That's the best way to do
it. This should have been a short included on the Blu-ray and DVD.
I kind of see what you're going for here.
Because we don't even acknowledge the Joker until about 20 minutes into the film.
Right.
And I feel that without the Joker in the opening act as like some sort of, establish that there is a brutal history between him and Batman, and even Barbara, and you'll have a lot more connection with the Joker on screen. With the book, the book jumps jumps right into Batman going to see him at the asylum, and we need to talk and all that, and that there's that history there. But with a movie, if you're jumping into the Joker 20 minutes into the film, that connection isn't really there the entire time.
No, but at the same time, I think that the one good thing about the Batman animated films is that the Joker, he's a figure that looms over any Batman adaptation, in my opinion. I think that maybe that might be what the team had in mind when they made these original scenes in the first 20 minutes. I think it's just like, this is the Killing Joke. Joker is going to loom over this, even if he's not being talked about explicitly, implicitly, he's still looming large over everyone, and the whole.
But the film doesn't even have a title card until the very end of the movie. The 20 minutes for the first 20 minutes of the film, you wouldn't even know that this is a Joker movie,
unless, well. Only if you didn't know what the title of the movie was.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be fair. No one who was going to... The people that were going to see it knew what they were getting into. And heck, people who are going to buy this on DVD and Blu-ray, they know what they're getting into.
But imagine turning it on cable and not checking what's on the menu.
Okay, that I'll grant you, but I don't think that's, I'd be willing to bet that that's not how we see these things. I mean, I don't think any of the DC animated movies have found their way to television in one way or another at this point.
They can end up on demand or something.
They could, but I'm talking about an actual cable channel. Like Cartoon Network doesn't run those DC movies for what reason I don't know. Why don't you run some of those rather than the freaking reruns of Teen Titans Go?
I guess I'm just locked in the old days of pre-digital cable, where I'd be searching for something on television and just be like, what am I watching here?
Fair point.
Where's the TV guy?
And that's a difference of I think generations, I would say. But no, it's. But yeah, I'm of the opinion that it's just the fact that the Joker is looming over this, no matter where you jump in on this one. Maybe not so much in that first act, which, let's go ahead and let's talk about the first act. First act is all about Barbara.
Yes.
It's all about Batgirl. It goes through the first 20 minutes of her dealing with it. I thought about this when I was watching this. If anyone's ever seen the anime series Black Lagoon, there's a character that's towards the end of the second season, in the final arc of the second season. I felt as though that the main antagonist of this first act reminded me a lot of that guy. And anyone who knows the series knows who I'm talking about once they see this movie. They'll see...
Reminds you of Paris France?
Paris France, right. Yeah. Oh boy, what the naming schemes.
Even Barbara was flabbergasted.
But no, and I think that it was also... It was interesting because we haven't really gotten anything that has been Barbara-centric when it comes to... at least since the days of Batman the Animated Series.
As more specifically, the new Batman Adventures.
Right. Yeah, we have not had much, if anything. I think... before anyone asks, yes, I'm well aware about the comics, about Birds of Prey, about Cassandra Cain, Stephanie Brown, and all those folks. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about popular mainstream adaptations like the video games and television. Yes, Barbara Gordon was in Beware the Batman, but that was, just her as Barbara.
The Batman.
Well, okay, that's true.
The Batman.
You know what? You turned me on.
Okay.
So good counter. Good counter.
Yeah. No, that's just something I remembered.
Yeah. No, that's fine. But then I'll just give it a little more and say the last 10 years or so.
Okay.
I think that's a fair thing because And, let's face facts, Stephanie and Cassandra haven't even gotten any kind of adaptation outside of the comics.
I think they're in the Lego games.
Lego games are kind of their own. By the way, the Lego Batman movie trailer was fantastic. Can't wait to see that. But it was cool to see, especially, one of the big selling points of this is that, of course, Bruce Timm, one of the executive producers, he was someone who was straight up and saying, we want to do this basically with the folks that helped make Batman in this generation a thing. And, Kevin Conroy's back as Batman. Mark Hamill once again steps into the Joker, which, we'll get into that in a moment. And then Tara Strong is back as Batgirl.
I've always loved Tara Strong's Batgirl.
I think Tara Strong's Batgirl is a little bit better than the original Batgirl, and nothing against Mary J. Bergman or whoever voiced her in Sub-Zero. Definitely not the best adaptation, but less said the better.
It's a good movie.
A good movie. It should be pointed out that we have actually been on a marathon watching the Batman animated series pretty much in the lead up to this movie.
What a nostalgia trip!
Yeah, I mean, we not even kidding. We got through the first 3 seasons and both of the movies, Mask of the Phantasm and Sub-Zero, before we got to this movie. We got to one episode of the new Adventures, which was the Holiday Nights.
Oh, what a classic!
Which I still think is funny as all hell.
But back to The Killing Joke.
Yes, back to that. There's been pre-release controversy about this movie.
Yes, and I sympathize.
And we can't really dance around it anymore. There's a point in this.
Spoiler alert if you have not seen the film yet.
Yes, if
you have not heard of this controversy.
Right. Although I find that hard to believe at this point. What happens is that
Barbara and Bruce get it on.
That's at the very end of it. Yes, that is what happened.
This is just wrong.
I'm in no way, shape, or form saying that I agree with the decision. And Brian,
this is something they also tried to push in the new Batman Adventures, and was explicitly hinted at in Mystery of the Batwoman, and pushed a step further in digital comics. And I was just like, why? What would draw you to this conclusion of an attraction between Bruce Wayne, billionaire playboy Bruce Wayne, guy into his late 30s or 40s, being doing it with Barbara Gordon, college student and daughter of one of his closest sort of confidants, Commissioner Gordon. You're screwing a friend's daughter. What would make you think this is a good idea? Especially in the new Batman Adventures, when you had this established relationship between her and Dick Grayson.
Like I said,
you're screwing your ward's ex-girlfriend.
Like I said, I'm in no way, shape, or form approving of this.
Of course, the Killing Joke movie is not in continuity with that show, but still, this is
it feels like that. It's almost Bruce Timm saying, "Look, let's." At the same time, though, this could also
she's still Commissioner Gordon's daughter.
This could, at the very least, be Bruce Timm saying, "You know what? Let's put one more nail in this coffin," because I think that it's pretty apparent that at the very end of this, that is just. To her is like, that's it, I'm done. It's not, and I think that's the one thing that so many people that have criticized this scene have ignored, is that you see the aftermath of her making that decision, and God, does she feel like she fucked up.
And I'm not trying to say that there can't be a massive age difference in a relationship. It happens in real life. It's happened in other fiction, like at the time that the original Star Wars takes place, Han Solo is like 35, and Leia is supposed to be 19.
So there you go.
But it's the fact.
Some people would also bring up Anakin and Padme.
There's about like a 4-year,
There's a bit of a difference. There's a bit of a difference, but I think, but the point still stands.
But the thing that I don't like about Bruce and Barbara is just the relationship with them and the characters around her. Like I said, she's the daughter of Jim Gordon, a guy that Batman relies heavily on, and she has been involved with Dick Grayson, the guy's ward. It's just
no, you're right.
Uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable, and I don't blame anyone who maybe looks at this movie and wonders about that. But at the same time, I'm also trying to ignore that external thing and just try to look at it from its own perspective. We not only see the aftermath of that, we see the regret, we see the frustration, and then we see her have to take on that mobster. And she basically almost loses herself over the edge of the abyss, as Bruce would elaborate to her in a previous scene. And it's that moment, and it's in that moment where she realizes maybe this isn't for me anymore. Next time we see her, she's given Batman back everything, and she's saying, "I'm out of the game."
And of course, this whole first act, this is completely original. This was not in the Killing Joke book.
I don't see, you know what? I don't see Alan Moore coming up with something like that just to come up with something like that. And I think even
she had already had a Hanging Up the Cowl comic book prior to the writing of the Killing Joke.
You're talking post-crisis, of course.
Post-crisis, yes.
Okay.
I think it was called Batgirl Special.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
I think you're right about that, yeah. Maybe they would have been better off doing an adaptation of that for the first 20 minutes, but...
I mean,
you know what?
Any adaptation, or any version of her hanging up the cowl that doesn't have her and Bruce necking and involves the Joker in some capacity, I would have accepted.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not even trying to defend this. I honestly think that, well, again, this is the screenwriter for this movie was Brian Azzarello, and I think that anyone who may or may not like his books, I mean, obviously it's your mileage will vary on this one from the most to the biggest degree, but again,
this is the guy that wrote a Joker comic book where the Joker skins a guy alive,
cuts off his own face. Let's not forget about that.
That's Death of the Family. Did he write that?
I think that was still Azzarello.
That figures.
So I mean, Azzarello did the Joker relaunch of during the New 52, if I recall.
Okay.
But no. But I think that just again, my basic thought on this is that I don't think this was as bad as so many people have made it out to be. I don't like it, and I certainly think that some of the moments in there could have been handled a lot better, but at the end of the day, I'm just like, you know what, this is an adaptation of The Killing Joke, whatever. I think that they're just... the scene itself isn't even very explicit, and I think that's...
Well, I don't think they could be very explicit with it in animation, even with an R rating.
True, but at the same time, the way that I had been reading about some of these things, I thought that it was going to be a lot more explicit than it actually was. Maybe I was wrong on that. Like, I wasn't expecting, say, I wasn't expecting a full-on, like a Japanese hentai scene, for God's sakes.
Oh, the horrors.
Less said about that, the better. But I think that just the context of the whole thing, and especially when you see Barbara's regret afterwards, I'm able to give this more of a pass than I think that most people have been able to do. Having gotten to all that, let's get to the meat of this.
The rest of the movie, however...
It's astonishing. This might be one of the best.
Once Batman enters the asylum, the real story kicks off,
and it kicks off, and it doesn't let up for the rest of the movie. This was terrific. This very well may be DC Animation's best adaptation, and I think that that's. I mean, granted, that may not be saying a whole lot, but I think that this is something I think that sets a bar at a new level. I really do think that. I mean, I mean, at Comic-Con we got the news that the Judas Contract is going to get adapted into a movie.
Finally, the Judas Contract. Although that could be problematic because all signs seem to point to it being a continuation of the DC animated movies that they've been putting out recently.
And more specifically, the Teen Titans versus Justice League movie that came out earlier this year,
which had a teaser for Taylor during the credits.
Tara.
What did I say?
You said Taylor.
Taylor. Tara. Had a teaser for Tara during the credits. Now, when I saw this, I was excited. Oh, they're finally going to do the Judas Contract.
But then you think about it.
How do you do the Judas Contract if Dick Grayson is already Nightwing and Deathstroke is supposedly dead from Son of Batman?
That's going to be an interesting thing to see how they work around it.
Yeah, that is...
I mean, we know that they're going to do it. It's just going to be a matter of watching how that production comes along. But
not only do you need Deathstroke, you need his son and the contract the Hive gave his son, which resulted in his son's death. And then Deathstroke takes up the contract, and it's gonna be, oh my god,
it's gonna be weird. I don't take any thought to think that it's not gonna be weird. Who knows? I mean, it's probably gonna be a continuation. I could see them maybe bringing in a few new Titans for this movie, especially since
they would have to bring in Jericho.
I mean, I think it's obvious to admit that that movie probably did well, which is why they're going full speed ahead with Judas Contract. Which I mean, I know that there were a lot of people who maybe didn't like it, but honestly, I'll take another Teen Titans movie over another couple seasons of Teen Titans Go any day of the week. Then again, that's a little too easy. That's almost like low-hanging fruit. But no, back to the topic.
The Killing Joke.
Yes.
I have been waiting years to hear that song. I've always wondered how that song would sound. I always envisioned something slower and more vaudevillian. I imagined something like, I go loony, da 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 da, whatever the words were, simply loony. But instead, they went for a very fast-paced, Broadway style, almost Danny Elfman style number.
That's what it felt like, yeah. But at the same time, though, I think that also... that fits in with the Joker for what kind of a villain that he is.
Absolutely.
Very theatrical, very, flamboyant, and just willing to just express himself the ways that he does. And should we point out, I don't think that any one of us expected that Mark Hamill would be able to sing that all that well.
I think we all expected that he was going to sing this, and it would probably be a wow factor.
And certainly that was one of the things that I heard a lot coming out of the theater, where people were wondering about that.
Or remarking on that.
Yeah, very true. But again, this was seriously, just to hear Kevin and Mark once again take up those roles that they made famous in the 90s. I mean, it was a trip. It was a terrific...
And what I find surprising is that Mark Hamill has said, and he even said this in an interview before the show, was that he always wanted his performance of the Joker to go out on a high note. Before it was Arkham City, and he said, okay, this is going to be my swan song.
Yep.
Unless you do the Killing Joke, then I'm back. And so now he's got the Killing Joke. Okay, this is going to be a swan song, right? Nope, because they've got him for Justice League action.
Which we should point out, we saw that trailer. That actually looks a lot of fun.
That
also
looks fun. It looks lighthearted, but like it's not going to be Teen Titans Go humor.
You know what it feels like? It feels like the original Teen Titans.
It feels like that. It also feels a little bit like Batman Brave and the Bold.
That as well. Look, if you can get those two, that's probably not the worst thing at all. I mean, we're trying to work in maybe some Comic-Con comments on this whole thing. Overall, though, I think still we're trying to keep the focus on the Killing Joke. This was just terrific to watch, and you're on edge with this movie. I think at almost every turn, just wondering what's going to happen next. And of course, it all kicks off with what is probably one of, if not the most infamous moment in comic books.
Does the term "women in refrigerator" ring a bell?
Yeah, I think that if Gail Simone had the internet back when this comic first came out, she probably would have altered her comment, her phrasing, because that is who the term came from. It was from Gail Simone
and her reaction to
an issue of Green Lantern
to Kyle Rayner's girlfriend being murdered and stuffed into a refrigerator just a few issues after he debuted as Green Lantern.
Yeah, and this was probably, before that, probably the most infamous example, but it still holds
and it's something even Alan Moore regrets writing today.
Right. And there was a recent little consternation before DC did their Rebirth that Babs Tarr, who was writing the Batgirl comics prior to Rebirth,
for the New 52,
had kind of sort of implied that maybe they had taken the Killing Joke out of continuity.
But that sort of goes against the earliest issues of New 52 Batgirl, where she remembers those events.
And I was about to say, in the most recent Rebirth issue with, I think it was Batgirl and the Birds of Prey, the scene was pretty much recreated panel for panel in the comics. Pretty much setting aside any doubt. And let me make a comment on that. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say that that is a moment that should be celebrated. It shouldn't. I think that the fact that Alan Moore regrets that to this day, I think really says a lot. But we can't just brush it away and act like it didn't happen, because
it's a pivotal moment for her.
It is a pivotal moment. And I think what was so great about this movie was just a little bit after the credits came out, we get a little bit of a bonus scene where Barbara is rolling back into her apartment on a wheelchair. She opens up a door, a bunch of computer equipment, she turns it on, we see Oracle.
She has become Oracle.
Which
got her past her disability and allowed her to take on crime in a new way.
Yes. I mean, honestly, Oracle, you could honestly say Oracle is sort of a character, before her time, honestly.
She was a role model for the disabled.
Oh yeah, I mean, well before Toph in Avatar: The Last Airbender, gave us a really cool blind character.
Well, there was a really cool blind character before her. His name is Daredevil.
Well, this is true. I'm talking about in this decade. All right. I see your point, but I'm also bringing up some other things.
Yes. I want to say I love Barbara Gordon as a character, and I am not a masochist. I never really saw that big of a deal with what happened to her. Probably because I had first read The Killing Joke about maybe less than 10 years after it was published, like 1995, 1994, thereabouts.
This is still when Batman the Animated Series was still running.
I had to have,
before the New Adventures.
I had to have been 12 when I first read The Killing Joke. My God.
Yeah, think about that for a second.
And when I saw what happened, first thing that went in my head was, this is the comic where that happened. And second of all, I never saw it as sort of detrimental to women. I just saw a former hero being badly wounded.
Right.
And it didn't matter of her gender.
Right. I agree with that. Like something that I always...
Because not only had something like that happened to her, something like that had happened to Dick Grayson Robin. The first post a post-crisis Batman story that wasn't year one was a reintroduction of Jason Todd. In the first issue of that, the Joker shoots Dick Grayson Robin in the shoulder, and Batman pretty much makes him hang up the cowl. I don't want you getting hurt anymore, despite the fact that you're in college and you have your own team to lead and blah 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 blah.
And thus bringing in Nightwing.
Thus bringing post-crisis Nightwing, because he had already been introduced in the Judas Contract pre-crisis.
I keep forgetting that Judas Contract was pre-crisis.
Yes, that's easy to forget that. Yeah. And you know, I don't think anybody batted that. Oh, Robin got shot and had to leave as a superhero, but oh my God, if something happens to the girl.
I mean, I think that it's
I just never saw it as a gender thing. I just saw it as a hero. Being wounded.
And here's
it's like the recent controversy with, you know, Apocalypse strangling Mystique. It's like, so female superheroes aren't allowed to be harmed by super villains? What?
And this is also something that I've kind of been thinking about, especially given how we've seen what the current climate we see our country in sometimes. Bad shit happens.
It does.
I mean, you never know when, you know, I mean, I don't like to say anything about this, and, you know, I'm sorry if this brings up some bad memories for some people out there, but you never know if you go to a nightclub. You never know anymore if you go to a nightclub if you're going to be able to just enjoy the night, or some psychopath that's going to bring in an AR.
Or if you simply just walk out the front door.
Yeah, I mean that's something I've always said about. That's
how this happened to Barbara. She just answers the door.
Right. That's something that I've always said about sports in general, and something that I actually do sometimes when, you know, I'm just randomly watching. I watch, you know, compilations of, say, NASCAR crashes. You know, I watch those and I see some of the most spectacular crashes that many people will ever see. More often than not, like 99 times out of 100, they're going to walk away from this. You know what's the most famous NASCAR death of all time? Dale Earnhardt at the 2001 Daytona 500. Go and watch that. And think for a split second how someone could die from a crash that simple. I had been watching him for years, and there are some crashes that I had seen him experience that I thought, there's no way he's walking out of that one. And when I saw that, when I saw it live, I thought the same thing as well. I didn't know that a little while later I was going to be hearing that he had died. I mean, this shit just happens. And I think that that's something that everyone who thinks about criticizing these kinds of stories for being, you know, for putting that, I mean, maybe we're being kind of hypocritical for something like that, given our taste in certain anime kind of take a dismissive tone when they have specific violence against female characters. Because that can be, you know, kind of just as random as anything else. But at the same time, I also don't think that when it's done in a realistic setting, it's not, you know, really. I don't think that this one particular one right here with Barbara Gordon was ever something more than just a plot device. And maybe that's, you know, saying the wrong thing, but I've never seen this as this being a sexist moment. And I think that's the point that we're trying to deal with. It's like, this is something that happens to people every day. I mean, go watch the news, for goodness sakes.
I mean, if Jim Gordon had a son instead of Barbara, although he did have a son, but
he did.
I'm talking about if Batgirl had been Batboy, you know, it's probably still would have happened.
Probably. And I think that that's always something that that people have got to keep in perspective. Yes, it's terrible what happened to Barbara, but so much good came from it. I mean, no, it's never going to take the bad taste out of some people's mouth about what actually happened to her, but I also think that shouldn't exclude the good that comes out of things. I mean, good can come out of tragedy, and I think that's the one thing that so many people forget when they see
look
these
at
kinds
Christopher
of moments.
Reeve.
You know, I mean, you want to talk about a guy. I mean, again, you know, watching the really that good on Superman.
Bob Chipman.
From Bob Chipman, it's basically he basically says that the only way he was ever able to transcend being Superman was to be a person who worked tirelessly for the rest of his life after he was paralyzed to try and make sure that, you know, people like him can get better treatments. And in a lot of ways he succeeded. I mean how many times when you see stories about some of the worst things, like say the Orlando shooting, the Boston Marathon bombing, God forbid 9/11 itself. How many times have we always focused on that when you hear that, then you hear the stories of the people that would help, the first responders, the volunteers, the civilians that think nothing of themselves to go in there and try to help the people who have been affected by this. That is what we mean when we say good can come out of tragedy. And that's true for not only reality but fiction as well, especially in fiction. And I think that's something that people who criticize The Killing Joke need to keep in mind.
So, do you think it's about wrap-up time?
I think it's about wrap-up time. Bottom line is, if you can't get the chance to go see it at a Fathom event screening, go ahead and buy it on Blu-ray and DVD. It's not a bad movie. I mean, depending on your own predilections about the first 20 minutes, I don't think that the first 20 minutes ruin this movie. I actually think that the first 20... Yes, do they add anything to the movie? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I think that it was actually really cool to see Batgirl, you know, in this modern setting, in modern animation, be able to kick a little bit of ass. But the rest of the movie, you know, right when the Batman goes to Arkham, once everything gets going, that is probably some of the best that you will ever see DC animate, and I mean that. DC, I have to admit, has been making me get a little more optimistic about themselves going forward in recent months. Rebirth, you know, there were people being wondering about the whole Dr. Manhattan thing, but I think that for the most part, you look at a lot of the Rebirth issues, everything seems to be going well for them. The animated movies still selling very well. The movies, I think that the Wonder Woman trailer looked terrific. I am definitely looking forward to that.
Justice League trailer, on the other hand,
let's leave that be for another time. I'm not sold on it either.
you suck, Snyder!
Let's not go back there. I think that overall, I think DC is starting to finally realize that, hey, we've got to do some different things. The fact that Jeff Johns is going to be helping a lot with the creative side and the movies and everything, that should hopefully take things in a different direction, hopefully make things a little more less dire than it has been up to this point. And I do think that there are so many people out, and I really think that DC at the moment, they're finally finding their footing again. After, you know, and I think that, you know, we've been talking about this with one of the guys that works over at Big Planet. You know, DC,
Big Planet Comics in Bethesda, Maryland. There's also a DC.
That's true.
store.
You're right about that, as well as a College Park and a Vienna store. We definitely, I mean, we talked about him last time we visited, and we just basically said, you know, DC, you know, DC's own share of the market itself had shrunk to ridiculous levels. Didio probably finally got the fear of God thrown into him, knowing that if he fucked up anymore, he was probably going to be on the outs. Deservedly so, by the way. But
I miss Paul Levitz running DC.
overall, though, I think that right now, I think that Rebirth is looking good. I think that the movies, I think there's a little bit of room for cautious optimism, especially with Wonder Woman, because I think that trailer was terrific. And I've even gone on record on this channel saying that I think that the Wonder Woman movie right now looks like this could be the good movie of the DC extended universe at this point. We don't know. We're just going to have to wait for 2017 for those movies to come out. Until then, we've still got MCU movies. We got Doctor Strange. That trailer was a trip.
Wow.
Definitely looking forward to that one. But yeah, that's going to do it for us right here. Go get The Killing Joke. You're not going to regret it.